Okay, we're going to start with this second article now in Challenging Behaviors, which I kind of wish they didn't have that name because I think this is really about social emotional development. But we'll see. Maybe I'll agree with the name later on. The second article in this part one is Culturally Responsive Strategies to Support Young Children with Challenging Behavior. I guess I would tell you that maybe you should try to predict, like, what kinds of things might be in this article for it to if it has that name. So it starts with Mrs. Green leads the children in her preschool classroom in their morning song. I used to do this every day. The more we get together, the more we get together, the happier we'll be. We call it the friendship song. So I think we should kind of list that as one of our friendship building strategies. I was also in a classroom, and I think it was at the child care center at SUNY Cortland. They had some kind of friendship thing they went around the room and did. Just see if I can find anybody who is in that center that can tell me what it was, because I don't remember how it went. But it was like a greeting, kind of teaching children how to greet each other. All right, so anyway, she stops abruptly to run after Miles, who has left Morning Circle to play with the musical instruments. As Mrs. Green approaches him, Miles folds his arms across his chest, then kicks his legs and screams. Mrs. Green gently places her hand on Miles' arm and looks him in the eye. She says, Miles, I see that you are upset because you didn't want to sit at Morning Circle and want to play with the musical instruments instead. Should we take the instruments to the circle and play with them after we've finished our calendar activities? Miles smiles. Mrs. Green notes his response and says, okay, first, please sit calmly at Morning Circle for 3 minutes, then you can play with the instruments. Is that a deal? And Miles nods. Mrs. Green responds, give me a high five. Miles' actions are clearly a source of frustration for his teachers, and although teachers will want to evaluate whether they are planning activities that require children to sit for an extended time, and ensure that the activities they offer children are active and meaningful, it is also important for teachers to understand how to support children who exhibit challenging behavior. Challenging behavior is defined as any repeated pattern of behavior or perception of behavior that interferes with or is at risk of interfering with optimal learning or engagement in prosocial interactions with peers and adults. Challenging behavior can signal difficulty with social and emotional adjustment, foundational competencies that are linked to children's school readiness and later school success. So she's bringing up a couple things here. One is that I have observed a lot of circle times where the calendar activities really only have one child really engaged, and it's really not fair to the other children to expect them to sit quietly, like the attention span, like it's not developmentally appropriate. So that's one thing to think about, but I do like how she handled it. All right, so then it goes on to say, although challenging behavior can occur in any classroom, research indicates that some children in urban communities experience conditions that contribute to risk factors for social and emotional delays. In addition, there is specific need to support children who live in poverty. As expected in poor family, as children in poor families are twice as likely to be at risk for developmental, behavioral, and social delays as children in families earning 200% or more of the federal poverty line. That is, while 10 to 20% of all preschool children show challenging behaviors such as aggression, noncompliance, defiance, tantrums, and property destruction, 30% of children who live in poverty exhibit such behaviors. So, if you read that again, you can kind of see it's just more likely to occur in terms of children who are living in poverty. Probably because their parents have to work more hours or are more tired from the job they have and making ends meet. In this article, we describe 5 culturally responsive core strategies to promote positive teacher relationships with young children in preschool and minimize challenging behavior. Learn about children and families, develop and teach expectations, take the child's perspective, teach and model empathy, and use group times to discuss conflict. As African American boys experience a much higher rate of suspensions and expulsions from preschool settings than do other children, these relationships building techniques are particularly relevant for teachers as they reflect on their own practices and biases, especially toward African American boys in early childhood classrooms. So then it talks about how we need to learn about children and families. And I think partnering with families is really going to be key in any early childhood classroom. And when it becomes more of, can you believe this parent did that? Like, even thinking that, I think, provides a space for this bias, right? How do we create pathways in our mind that have us thinking about parents seeking to understand and being generous in our thoughts when we reach out to them and we communicate with them? So, a core consideration in developmentally appropriate practice and cultural responsiveness is that practitioners learn about each child and family and intentionally adapt and respond to each child's strengths and needs. Culturally responsive practice is often defined as using the experiences and perspectives of children and their families as a tool to support them more effectively. As this approach is child and family centered, it sets the stage for critical relationship building. Teachers can partner with families by inviting them to visit the classroom and participate in activities with their child. Teachers can also arrange to visit children at home, where they may engage in informal discussions with family members about what children enjoy doing for fun and learn about their favorite food, toy, or song. These interactions can reveal cultural values and norms in the home environment. Families may also share information about their child's temperament, primary play partners, and home language. Meetings at school with families might address family routines, religious holidays, and traditions and activities that families enjoy in the community. Teachers can use information they learn about a child and family to support the child's social and emotional adjustment to the early childhood environment. Further, these conversations can demonstrate that not all children and families within a particular racial or ethnic group display similar characteristics, which is a potential teacher bias. Sharing a short, warm anecdote with families in person or in a note about something their child did that day assures parents that the teacher cares about their child and makes an effort to know the child individually. This further connects families to their child's classroom community. So some centers aren't going to have time or coverage for classrooms to do home visits. I think certain programs are set up that way to do home visits. Sometimes in elementary school, the universal pre-K might be able to, but really a lot of our child care centers are not going to be doing home visits, so you have to think of other ways that you're going to partner with them. There's ways to set up like classroom books you can send home. Like, we'll talk about it throughout this semester, really. And maybe we can come up with other ideas that I don't know about. So during a recent conversation with Miles's mother, Mrs. Green learned that Miles' father is a musician. Oh my God. I would love that. And that Miles really enjoys music. So Miles' mother explained that Miles likes to dance and sing to his favorite songs, moving vigorously around the house. Mrs. Green used her knowledge about Miles's interest to plan music and movement activities for future morning circles to engage Miles. That seems like a no-brainer. So sometimes some teachers may get into these power struggles where they gotta make Miles do what they want him to do, but really we want to set children up for success. So if she knows what Miles is really engaged with, she can set him up for that success and get him wanting to be participating in that way without having to have like prove to Miles that he's got to do what she says, right? And we'll also look at how Vivian Paley would handle this. You know, sometimes teachers will say, well, all kids have to do the same thing, or it's not fair. And there is some people who say that really children are really good at individualizing and understanding that, well, that's just what that child needs, and that's okay, you know. So we need to... there's equity and there's equality. We want equity. What do we need to give each child to help them be successful? It doesn't mean it has to always be the exact same thing. It can't be to the detriment of somebody else, right? All right, so the next thing is that they say that teachers should develop and teach expectations. Um, and I think if you are ever in an elementary school classroom, you always spend like that first month of the year teaching all the rules of the classroom. Like that's what it's all about is what is the routine? What are we doing next? And it may be a little different in a childcare setting just because it's like year round. But there's going to be a lot of that too. That's probably occurring because we know there's a natural like more people in the fall come, then they go away for summer and all of that. So let's see what they say. The second culturally responsive strategy in the pyramid model framework is developing and teaching 2 to 5 classroom expectations that are linked to the values and cultures of the children, teachers, and families. Expectations should be positively stated, so you wouldn't write no running, no name calling, right? Let's see, and should apply to both children and adults. Okay, after cultivating a better understanding of children and families, early childhood teachers can base expectations on shared values and connections to cultures. Young children should be included in forming guidelines for behavior as they are more likely to understand and follow them when they have input. Examples of expectations for preschool children include be a friend, be safe, and be a helper, and use listening ears, use gentle touches, and use walking feet. I like that. Now, my thing is if you're in a 24, all year round program, there isn't a natural maybe time like to if you still have the same students, why, I guess, and these are a lot focused on pre-K, I believe, and we'll see if it changes. But so with pre-K, we know sometimes we have people going to kindergarten, so maybe they're just assuming that like in the fall there's like a natural organic time that maybe they're not going to be much different. Like I'm not sure how this is cultural, like how it would change. Be a friend, be safe, be a helper, use listening ears. That like I'm not sure, except that including everybody makes it certain that everybody's involved and understands, right? Expectations need to be consistently emphasized to prevent challenging behavior in addition to responding to opportunities that arise during the day. Teachers decide how and when they will teach, model, and positively reinforce the expectations across environments. Circle time, music, movement activities, research, lunch, and snack. Recess, not research. Wouldn't that be something? So that the guidelines and associated behaviors become part of the program culture. And so they're also talking about the culture of the classroom as an environment, the way the environment feels, not just culture like your ethnic background. Many teachers develop songs and have hand movements to go with their expectations, and other approaches include modeling, using puppets, reading stories, and role playing. Pictures of the children, teachers, and staff demonstrating the expectations can be posted in classrooms and common areas for further encouragement. There's a little paragraph about the pyramid model framework, and I've been at a couple of conferences. SUNY Empire does a lot with this. I'd be interested to know if any of you really talk about the pyramid model at your centers or in the classrooms you're in. It says the 5 core strategies we suggest are informed by fundamental principles of the pyramid model, and this is by Fox and Hemmeter, a comprehensive framework for addressing the social and emotional outcomes of young children. The pyramid model includes 3 levels of support: universal prevention strategies for use with all children, secondary social and emotional approaches for children at risk for social and emotional delays, and tertiary and individualized and function-based intervention for children with persistent challenges. So I think we're probably going to have to take a look at how this is in comparison to the SEL, and they had us looking at KSEL and curriculum. Pyramid model, I think, is kind of a way to handle situations, like with a chart kind of thing. We'll have to look at it. I think they're just mentioning it, but I don't think they're going to really take us through it, but I could be wrong. All right, so to reinforce positive behavior and to bring the actions to children's attention, it's important to verbally acknowledge children and adults when they demonstrate expectations. When a child's behavior reflects a great example of an expectation, such as be a friend, like helping another friend clean up a spill at lunch or inviting a new child to build a block tower, teachers can write a note of thanks or give the child an opportunity to wear a super friend cape. That's kind of cool. A bulletin board in a common area provides a public place to post note cards recognizing adults who demonstrate examples of meeting program expectations. Miss Wilma was a helper today when she fixed Aaron's hearing device. So, my only thing here is this like a photo, because in a pre K classroom, they don't have the reading skills. Now, early childhood goes through second grade, so they would be able to maybe read simple sentences later on. But I find this an interesting thing. I'll have to see if we can figure it out. To be culturally responsive, it's important that expectations reflect the values and cultures of families and teachers and other staff in the school. For example, in cultures that value community over independence, guidelines for some activities may emphasize, and it says like snack, relationship building behaviors, like passing the food bowl over independent adaptive skills like taking an appropriate portion of a self-serve snack. So that's interesting. For me in an early childhood, like childcare center, family style meals is the developmentally appropriate way to approach that. Yet in the universal pre-K, in some of the public schools, some of my students reported that that wasn't what they were doing. In fact, and I do think this was an off day, they were watching a movie while they ate. So I don't know. But there's also, when you're in a younger classroom, if you have cultures where they want to feed their child everything because they don't want anything to get messy. Or so when they come in a classroom and they're doing family style and it's like messy and people are spilling milk and everything, it can really make families uncomfortable. I think that though, like NACI would want us to be doing family, they would expect it. And I don't know if Quality Stars would or not. I'll have to ask Alana and find out. All right, develop and teach empathy. Now I'm thinking about that before I read this, and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to do that? I'm assuming they're going to do it through role modeling, of facilitation of discussions or stories. But I did watch this like documentary where they showed young children, like toddlers, maybe three, like a baby would cry, or it was like a doll, and the child would go to see if it was okay. So they said that demonstrated that they were capable of empathy. But I think it's earlier than some of us think. Another culturally responsive strategy for supporting positive relationships is empathy, concern for others arising from an emotional connection. Empathetic individuals apply interpersonal sensitivity to understand the experience of others in order to provide support or assistance. Researchers have long theorized that empathy is a critical component in teacher effectiveness in urban settings. I don't really get why they keep throwing in urban. That seems interesting. Positively impacting teachers' dispositions and interactions with students of color. Thus, it is important for teachers in urban settings to model and encourage empathy to foster a culturally responsive classroom environment. And I'm thinking empathy is important to do anytime. We'll have to read on. Teachers, let's see. To develop and teach empathy, teachers first have to know themselves. It's necessary for teachers to engage in critical self-reflection to uncover implicit personal biases and assumptions and bridge understanding across cultural groups. Whether subconscious or explicit, teachers' negative perceptions about children who differ from them in terms of culture, race, or ethnic identity can impact the teacher's ability to teach effectively and create empathetic classrooms. Teachers can help children learn empathetic behavior by modeling warm and responsive actions, like anticipating and responding promptly to children's needs and worries, and greeting children with a smile. Using storybooks, games, and music is another way to teach empathy. Teachers can create lessons and activities that highlight respect, kindness, compassion, and responsibility, and help children discover similarities with peers from different backgrounds. Teachers can ponder reflective questions such as, what are my initial reactions to this child and their family? What do my reactions tell me about my personal beliefs and assumptions? And what can I do to build the child's and family's trust? Although there is work to be done to unpack the contextual factors that may explain why African American boys are expelled and suspended at a higher rate than other preschool children, Self-reflective questions like these and those offered throughout anti-bias education for young children and ourselves are one place to start. If you took 125 with me, then that's the text we were using by Louise Derman Sparks. Historically, picture books have featured mostly white characters. When choosing high quality books for the classroom, make sure that the characters reflect the ethnic makeup of your classroom. And it's important for all children, and particularly those of color, to see themselves in books. During these lessons, teachers can teach relevant emotion vocabulary, read books, sing songs, reflect the children's cultures. According to the tenets of Afrocentric teaching, which harnesses the skills African American children bring to schools to engage them in the classroom experience, combining music with creative movement, mime, and dance is a form of expression for many African American children and engages them in shared affective experiences that are used for empathy development. Those of you who just finished the Children in the Arts class, either last semester or over winter break, usually I do a jazz kind of investigation, which I think is kind of cool for the history, but the music aspect, and often they're very talented musicians of color. And I think kind of combining the approach that Palo had us using for art and creative explorations, doing that with music is also definitely something we could have done. In the 4-week class I just finished over winter break, we really didn't have time, but we did sort of get into the music in the 15-week section. So, okay. For example, in a jubilant rendition, Miles and Carmen share a toy drum and tambourine as they dance to a popular song heard in their communities. The song promotes unity, friendship, and love. Through group music making, children can express feelings and connect with the feelings of others, promoting positive social and emotional development. So we talked a lot about how healing art, creating art can be, or the process art can be, and that would also include music, making music. So we also talked about maybe using music to express feelings. We talked about how colors in our art can express feelings, but one thing that it would have been nice that if we had time, someone could have done an investigation where we played different kinds of music and had children like illustrate how it made them feel through an art, medium. And then the next thing here says perspective taking, and that's an advanced thing that I think, takes a lot for children to get to. A fourth culturally responsive strategy, perspective taking, has been defined as the capacity to understand another's thoughts, feelings, or internal states. Through the use of effective statements, teachers can reframe a child's challenging behavior and focus on the child's internal state. Effective statements are I statements that express a feeling, precisely describe a child's behavior, and make the child aware of the positive or negative impact of the behavior. Take, for example, a child who often transitions from lunch to outdoor time by pushing their way through classmates to discard their trash and dash to the playground door. A teacher might say, "Stop running in the classroom. When you run in the classroom, our friends are not safe." To reframe the child's behavior, the teacher might consider that the child is excited to play outside. And from this perspective, the teacher could rephrase their statement, "I see you're really excited about going outside. Thank you for putting your dish in the trash. But please remember to use your walking feet and move around your friends." When teachers use effective statements to reframe a child's challenging behavior, it demonstrates their understanding of the child's perspective. Miles' teacher used an effective statement that considered his perspective about Morning Circle when she stated, "Miles, I see you're upset because you do not want to sit at Morning Circle and want to play with musical instruments instead." It also means that every time you say something to that child, it's not negative. You're pointing out, you understand where they're coming from and what they're trying to do, and then you're melding it to how can they kind of bring what you need them to do and what they want to do, what they want to explore together. And then it says about using group time to discuss conflict. The final culturally responsive strategy, drawing from the pyramid model framework, is using group time to resolve conflict. This allows for a restorative justice approach, which offers those involved in the conflict an opportunity for reconciliation. Because really, we should be done with the days where we force children to apologize when they don't mean it. Because who wants to be working with people who apologize to you and don't mean it, or married to someone who apologizes to you all the time just to shut you up? Right? We want authentic expressions and communications. We hope. All right. So it says, although many children benefit from the use of group time to address conflict, and this approach can promote inclusion as opposed to exclusion, it's important to develop methods and awareness so children do not feel ashamed during the process. I feel like this could be very hard to pull off, especially in pre-K. So maybe they're talking about later. Let's see. Feel shame during the process, but rather part of a trusting community of problem solvers. When done well, problem solving as a group can foster active engagement and learning and enable children and adults to build strong relationships. The teacher can establish the tone for the group by reading a poem about friendship or sharing a culturally relevant and familiar quote from a song, movie, or book. Next, it is helpful to remind children of the expectations for the discussion. We've been practicing how to listen and how to talk at group time. Let's remember to wait calmly for our turn to speak. Make eye contact with the person to whom you're talking and use kind words. In some cases, teachers can minimize challenging behavior by conducting group time prior to situations with potential for challenging behavior, before a field trip, beginning of the school year, prior to implementing a change to the environment. And then they have a conclusion. Young children with challenging behavior are often rejected by their peers and receive less positive feedback from teachers than their peers do. Early childhood classrooms are a primary setting for teaching skills that are critical for young children's social and emotional development. Given the large amount of time many children spend in these settings, it is important that strong, positive teacher-child relationships be nurtured to ensure the children receive the support needed to promote positive social and emotional development and school readiness. In general, practitioners in urban settings play a valuable role in young children's social and emotional development by providing supports that are relevant and appropriate. The 5 culturally responsive strategies described in this article can guide teachers in creating a classroom atmosphere that not only responds to children's challenging behavior, but anticipates their needs. Implementation of these strategies helps teachers initiate sustainable relationships and nurturing classrooms where all children are valued and have opportunities to grow and develop. The more children get together and engage in pro-social interactions with teachers and peers, the happier everyone will be. This reminds me of the importance of continuity of care. So children also are going to grow, have an easier time growing socially and emotionally if there isn't a constant change in who is leading the classroom, right? So centers or classrooms that have a lot of turnover, that can make it harder on children because children have a hard time with change. And that means your routine's always changing. They don't know what the expectations are going to be. And then there are some questions. I'm not sure how much I think it's going to be interesting for the people that are in situations where they're already in a classroom. It will benefit us to perhaps have their perspective, but also we need to think about what our questions are about what's brought up and maybe reword some of these questions. So, how does your perspective influence how you talk and interact with the family members of children who have different culture, race, ethnicity, and or ability than yours? And this might be a situation where you think about if you speak to people, friends, or other students differently based on their background. Think about your initial reactions when you meet a child whose culture, race, ethnicity, and or ability is different from your own. Do you have any assumptions about the child that are different than the assumptions you have about a child who shares an identity? I think some of these might be very difficult for us to do, so we may skip them. And I may try to have case studies or something that we can practice some of this stuff. And then, Yeah, I think these, unless everyone's in a classroom, some of these reflection questions will be difficult for us to apply. Yeah, I think these are things that are good for us to consider.